And this is Jen Gray, and welcome to Be Genuine Podcast. It is my heart that by the end of this episode, you believe that your story matters and that your authenticity is your superpower. Welcome to the stage, Jen Gray. Oh, hold that thought. All right, friends, have you ever moved? You guys know how crazy, insanely stressful that can be. And I have a podcast partner that absolutely is a solution to this problem. If you are moving anywhere near the Atlanta area, you guys have got to call these guys. There is a company that genuinely makes the process as stress-free as possible. Atlanta Pack and Load boasts nearly 30 years of experience providing customized packing, moving, and storage solutions. They are fully licensed, fully insured, Better Business Bureau accredited, and the trusted moving partner for realtors all over Georgia. Call today for a free quote and make sure you let them know that you heard them right here on Be Genuine Podcast. 770-779-8959 or find them online. All of their info will be in the show notes. Move the smart way. Move the pack and load way. Hey friends, I am super excited for today's episode. I have my new friend, Amy Grace. She is the compassionate voice behind the Everyday Supermoms podcast, where she interviews moms from all walks of life, sharing their stories and wisdom. She focuses on supporting mothers across the lifespan, believing that a healthy, happy mom impacts the whole world. As a mom for over 25 years and a licensed therapist in Colorado, Amy specializes in helping moms from preconception to empty nesting through her podcast, counseling courses, and more. He is dedicated to empowering mothers to embrace their journey with authenticity, resilience, confidence, and connection. So welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
The whole premise of this podcast is I believe we are better together. Clearly, I know that's your heart as well, and specifically with motherhood. But in learning to step into the most authentic versions of ourselves, tell us about who you are, how you got to do what you're doing, and how that passion kind of fell into place.
I think it's interesting how our lives can go different directions than we originally thought they were going to go, right? So when I was growing up, I knew I wanted to help people. So that was a big part of my heart, even as a kid. So starting pretty young, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. And that was my vision and that was my plan. And it was my plan even until freshman year in college. And I was pre-med and, going about life. And then I got a surprise after one crazy night with my boyfriend, found out about a month later that I was expecting a child and I was pregnant. And for me, the choices that felt valid were either adoption or parenting. And I was 17, like I said, pre-med. I had this vision for my life. It was a relatively new relationship. I thought it had potential, but I wasn't sure. I wasn't going to rely on it. Certainly was not going to get married because of this. And so I wrestled my entire pregnancy with which choice to make. I wasn't somebody who had always envisioned being a mom, but I didn't not envision being a mom. It was just not a big part of the picture.
Yeah.
It was just like, yeah, maybe, sure. But here I was, 17 years old, young freshman in college, and my whole world was changing. And so I spent my whole pregnancy wrestling with it, due diligence of checking with, I worked with an adoption counselor. I did financial aid pictures where I tried to figure out what would life look like to finish college still if I did choose to parent. I literally did all this logical, rational stuff. And then I also prayed a bunch because for me, my faith was a big piece of it. And where do I go from here? And ultimately, I ended up choosing to parent 1 week before my child was born.
Wow.
And everything fell into place. And so I had my first daughter when 2 weeks before I turned 18, summer after my freshman year in college. I did at that point decide that I didn't want to spend the first 12 years of her life in school. And so that I decided to let go of my doctor dreams. But I still knew that I cared about people and I didn't know what that looked like. And along that route, way back in the olden days, we had correspondence courses because this is pre-internet online education. This is one of those moments where I feel old when I tell people I would study at home and type up a paper and mail it. We didn't even email these things. Mail it to my teacher. Yes, I now feel old.
That's okay.
And one of those courses I took was in psychology. And that was my first taste of it. And I'm like, this will be at least interesting to do this way. I can write some papers about some cool stuff. And so I studied psychology for the first time and loved it. And I was like, well, we could do that. And then I went back to school full time and decided I really liked communication. So I ended up my undergrad with interpersonal communication and psychology as my majors. But I was really stubborn. So a lot of people told me if you choose to parent, you're never going to graduate, you're going to be destitute, like all these like terrible things. Like
Right. Like who actually says that? But they do, right? It's
they
like,
do. They really do. So, like, all these things that people said, but I'm like the strong-willed kind of person that was like, I'm going to show you. And so I was determined to not just graduate, but like I got two majors, graduated in the top of my class, like had my 3-year-old standing. I have this great classic picture of me holding a 3-year-old in my cap and gown for undergrad. And I went on to get my master's degree and counseling, and I have a second one in Christian studies. And so, like, I kind of was like one of those, like, yeah, I'm going to keep learning, keep learning. I want to figure this stuff out. And then along the course of my career, I kept finding myself in roles where I was supporting moms, and it was my jam. And even when it was a role that kind of looked like I was supposed to be supporting the kid, I found myself gravitating towards supporting the moms. So, like, I would do in-home family therapy, and the identified patient would be the kid. And I'm like, but if I support the mom, then the kid benefits too.
right.
So I just kept gravitating toward the moms. And so when I opened my private practice 9+ years ago, I decided to focus entirely on moms. And, I am now, my oldest daughter will be 26 in less than a month at the time of this recording. And she is thriving. She is finishing her doctorate in physical therapy. She has, she spent 2 years as a missionary in Bolivia doing healthcare work and adventure ministry with orphans. Like, this is the kind of human she turned into.
Oh, go mom. Way to go. That's amazing. And go
Yeah.
her. That's incredible.
Yeah, she is really incredible. And then I have 3 more kids still at home that are 10, 15, and 13. And they're all so amazing. And again, this is from a woman who, again, I wasn't like, I can't wait to grow up and be a mom. But as I've come into that role, and this is that authenticity piece, as I figured out how to live as a mom that I'm meant to be, not trying to put myself into a box that somebody else has created or some social construct of what a good mom is, or some social media image or like Pinterest version or whatever, but figuring out for me what is being a good mom. For my kids, what do they need? For my life that balances way too many things, what does that look like to be authentic to who I am, to what my passions are, to what my gifts are, to my personality? And so over time, I then kind of wanted to even get outside of my one-to-one therapy office. And that's when I started creating some other things like my podcasts and courses and things like that that I have out there to help more moms to be able to figure out how do they hone their inner super mom and be able to thrive in their own personality, gifts, strengths, values, all of that to create a motherhood they truly love.
Oh my goodness. I love that so much. So you are such an inspiration. I love that. I love finding people who it could have ended up in so many different ways, right? I can't even imagine being 17 years old and being faced with that adult level decision of
Yeah.
this isn't just me anymore, and this isn't just my dreams, and now I have this whole other world to figure out. But how that was the catalyst to ultimately send you down the journey you were meant to go on. And using that as all these alliterated things, right? Your message, and your pain is your purpose. And you don't using that instead of looking back and saying, oh my goodness, it disqualified me. It kicked me out. Instead, it prepared me. It gave me empathy for the kind of person that I wouldn't have even had empathy for or even had the capacity for had I not gone through it. There's so many questions. But first of all, so just take me back when you what was that like? Did you have a lot of family support, friend support? Were you single momming it for what was that journey like?
Yeah. So her bio dad very quickly decided he was not going to be in the picture. We broke up when I was about 6 months pregnant and started started showing. And so he was not in the picture. My parents would have, at that time, would have said they would have preferred I choose adoption. But once I chose parenting, were 100% behind me. But they also lived 45 minutes away from my college campus. I did live with them for like the first 6 months of her life while I kind of learned the ropes, got my feet under me and all that kind of stuff. But then I lived in student housing on my college campus. I had really supportive friends to the extent that they can be at like 18 years old when they're looking at like, how do we support our friend that just became a mom and is still a student and we still want to do our college thing and all of that. So yes, I had supportive people in my life, but it was more, in a lot of ways, I lived what I think a pretty normal college life I would have chosen anyways. I was not a big partier anyways, so it wasn't like I had to give up partying and all that kind of stuff. I was involved in my college ministry and I was a serious student, and so I had friends that I could bring my kid along to. Like, they would come hang out at my house and we'd have chick flick nights while my kid was sleeping upstairs, or she'd join in on the party or whatever. And so like in some ways it just kind of, it wasn't, in some ways it didn't rock a world as much as I think it would have, but then I think I'm just like unaware of what normal college life is like, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What, you have nothing else to compare it to, and
Yeah.
you clearly made the best of it. And you, not only did you survive it, you thrived through it. And I can only imagine the hard parts in between. And I'm only just, so in my own mom journey, so I'm a mom of 4 kids. So 15,
Hmm.
15, 12, 11, and 9. And so I'm
Okay.
thinking, as a first time mom, a lot of times you are going to these playgrounds and it's of moms who have, multiple kids, the age range is all over. And so finding even your mom fit of friends is hard as it is. But now you're in a season where 99% of people are not in that season. So what did that
Mhm.
look like? Like what, compared to mothering maybe your other three, I would imagine there's
Mhm.
a difference in what that looked like.
Yeah, so I would say, I didn't really build many mom friends until she was closer to like four-ish.
Mhm.
3, 4 was about when I started really building my mom network. Before then, my life was so full with all these other things, and she had daycare, so she had plenty of like little peers and things like
Yeah.
that. But like I didn't really have mom friends. And then I made my first mom friend with actually like a group from church. And actually to this day, we're still friends. I'm excited. I hopefully get to see her this summer.
Fun.
And I just went to one of her daughter's weddings last summer. So, like, all these years later, we have this connection. But that was when I first realized how important mom friends were, because all of a sudden I can now talk about all these other things versus like holding it in. And
Right.
keep in mind, this is like 2003. This is well before social media where people would like learn stuff about parenting online. Like, we weren't even Googling much back in those days. It was like I had a book I could read if I was curious about something with motherhood.
Right.
So, gaining mom friends was so essential for me to be able to like talk about stuff and like hear that I wasn't just because I was a young mom that I dealt with these struggles, but rather because it's a mom thing. Like, oh, it's normal to worry about this stuff. Oh, it's normal to sometimes feel like you're not doing a good enough job, or to not know what decision to make about kindergarten or whatever the thing of the day was. Once I had mom friends, it so normalized that struggle. And so it was from now on that I started building more of those, but it was still kind of in the middle. Like, I still felt like I was straddling two worlds.
Right.
My peers that were like young adult 20s that didn't have kids, and then my friends that did. And so as my friends started having kids, I was like, yay, people have kids. They now get me. And I started getting a lot more like, I'd get like phone calls or messages that were like, hey, so now that I'm dealing with my own kids, I am like so much more curious how you did this in college.
Yeah. Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, that's so huge. What was the first trigger for you that you were like, huh, I think there may be something here where I can add value to moms, even when I'm in the thick of motherhood? Was there a certain catalyst, a certain situation that kind of opened your mind, or how did that all happen?
It started really early. Like, my daughter was still like infant toddler level, and a pregnancy center I was connected with said, hey, we've got a girl that could really use some mentorship. Would you be willing to meet with her for coffee just
Ooh,
to like share life about and what it was like to be young and pregnant? And I was like, sure. And so, like, it even started before I was even out of college, that I started having these connections with other moms. And, it just kind of, it was funny because it didn't fully click that yes, I'm on a mission for moms. Like I didn't realize that's what I was doing, even though I was doing it, is what was interesting. Like I worked for pregnancy centers, I worked in foster care, I worked in like therapeutic supervised parenting time, all these different ways where I had all this contact with moms, but it wasn't like a super obvious. And then all of a sudden I was like, yeah, that's all I want to do. Like, I want to talk motherhood all day long. I want to support moms. And, my passion just kind of grew. And the thing is over the course of my motherhood now, so, almost 26 years into this, plus pregnancy, you're a mom when you're pregnant.
Sure.
So, over the course of all these years, I have been a young single mom, an average age married mom. I later got divorced, so I had to do the divorced and co-parenting mom. Thankfully, it's peacefully co-parenting. And then I got remarried, and I am blended family mom with bonus grown stepsons that are awesome. But like learning to navigate how do you build a relationship when they were never even in your home. And then now I have even bonus grandsons. And I've parented kids from infanthood through adulthood. Like I've done all these different things. So it's almost like my life was kind of set up to have had so many different experiences such that I can have sympathy and empathy for like wherever somebody comes to me from. I'm never surprised. I never feel judgmental. I just feel like I can kind of relate to that somehow, oddly.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay. I can relate to that on all the things. So I'm a single mom of 4 kids.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I've navigated the married, and my job, I was actually in ministry before. Then I went through a divorce. I
Hmm.
lost ministry and had to regain where do I fit in? And so like you,
Hmm.
I wanted to help people. And it's funny, you
Hmm.
said you wanted to be a doctor. So my beginning story was I wanted to go into politics because I thought that's what leadership looked like. I'm like, well, that's how I can influence people. And then that didn't last. I was like, this is not for me. So and it ended up going the ministry route. And then when life shifted and changed, very similar to yours, then you decide, what is this going to look like? And so I think for anyone listening, like the encouragement is life is going to take twists and turns, and you
Hmm.
can look at it as, oh my goodness, it just messed up my whole plan. Or take the step back, take a big deep breath and say, could this be preparing me for something different? How on
Yes.
earth could God possibly use this with
Hmm.
the gifting that he's given me? And that's another thing. I was just listening to somebody and they talked about coaches. And they said a lot
Hmm.
of times coaches just assume, oh, I'm not necessary, I'm not needed, because there's plenty of them out there. And you assume everyone has that same gifting because it's kind
Hmm.
of a dime or a dozen, right? Like there's so many
Hmm.
coaches out there. But the beautiful part of someone out there, if you're thinking, you know what, I love pouring into somebody, or I do have like this extra sympathy in my heart for this type of person, like leaning into that as that's not normal. Like that's actually
Hmm.
special to you. And there could be something there if we take the leap of faith that it is to kind of, check that out. And like, so I love
Hmm.
that about your story, that it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go major in this and get a degree in this and go be a motherhood specialist. It's just life happened and you kept moving forward and then noticed this woven thread in all of that. Tell me the order. So you graduated, and then did you go back and then you get your counseling degree? Is that kind of what happened to then step into
Yeah,
coaching?
sort of. I had started a counseling degree and then decided I didn't really like the program that I was in at the time, but stayed at that school and finished the coursework for my master's in Christian studies. And then I started working at a pregnancy center. And as I was working at a pregnancy center, I was a director of client services. And I realized that the part that I really liked was the client work. And I was like, I don't want to be a director way up here, just managing stuff.
Separated
I
from
want to be,
people.
I want to be in it.
Yeah.
And so that's when I was like, I'm going to go back and finish that counseling degree. So I went back actually to a different school and finished and did my counseling degree while still finishing the other degree. So technically, I was in two master's programs at the same time.
Listen, sometimes it's like you look at your life and like, I'm glad there's pictures to prove that I survived it because it's a blur.
There's things I look at and like, it's really been a pattern in my life of taking on too much. But I thrived that way. But yeah, so
People get
I
stuff done.
finished, I finished the second degree first, and then went back and finished the first one.
Good
And
times.
but yeah, so I ended up with two master's degrees and was looking and I worked for a couple of nonprofits. I like kind of floated around, and then I had a baby. It was super convenient because I got laid off due to a grant funding drying up right as I was having a baby,
Oh,
which sounds terrible. but that means there's unemployment.
Hey, okay. Look at that. The light at the end of the tunnel, like the glimmer.
Yes. Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And then I'm like, wait, they're like, but you get unemployment. And I was like, hey,
This isn't good.
that's about as good as it gets in America to get unemployment while having maternity leave. I'll take it.
That's a great perspective. Yeah, though that's crazy. That's
Yeah.
so funny.
So it ended up a huge blessing. And then I after then, I've never worked full time back in a job since my kids were born. I have
Mm,
worked odd hour jobs, I've worked part time. Now, when I say that, I work more than 40 hours a week at this point, but I don't work for anybody.
yeah,
And so I have the ability to flex my life around my kids, which was really important to me. So to be able to, especially once I had 4 kids, I'm like, I didn't have 4 kids to just pass them off to somebody else all the time. Like, and so for me, it was really important. I wanted to be there after school. So even with my therapy practice, I only have one day a week I see clients after school hours. The rest of the week, I see them only during school hours so that I can, be able to do all the running around to all the activities and show up to the after school activities and things like that.
yeah.
So I was able to kind of like customize even my work life to what made sense for being able to be the mom I wanted to be.
I think that's so powerful. Also, like you, I'm so entrepreneur, right? Which means all the things. I traded the 9 to 5 to work like 5 a.m. to midnight, right? But again,
Hmm.
like you just said, it's choosing to build the kind of motherhood that you want to have. And so for some people, when they see, I can only imagine when they see you, they're like, this could be easier if you just went and got a stable job where you just work these hours and you're like, no, no, no. But the trade off, like, there's no way. Like, there's some days I'm like,
Hmm.
I don't know how I'm going to make this work. And I'm like, but I'm going to figure it out because the trade off of me going and not being able to be there for carpool line and drop off at baseball, softball, and orchestra, like that's not even on the
Hmm.
table. And
Yeah.
so when you have that in your mind, then you look for the ways it can happen. If you're looking for
Yes.
excuses, you'll find them. But if you're looking
Hmm.
for ways to make it happen and are willing to do the work, I absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'm with you on it's not
And
it's
there are trade-offs because you do have the security of a nice salary sometimes with those jobs and the predictability. Whereas with entrepreneurship, it's a gamble sometimes. You don't know what you're going to earn, when you're going to earn it, all of these kinds of things. So there is a gamble piece to it. Like, not everybody has these happily ever after stories, or they don't all happen on the same timelines. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've seen a coach. I've been in courses with future coaches that literally have zero background in anything. In the courses, they're like, I don't know what I want to coach on. And then I see them on social media selling like $5,000 programs and killing it. And it's like, 2 months ago, you didn't even know what you were going to teach on. And so, yes, some people go out there and they make bank right off the bat. But like, if you are doing something that is in line with who you are, that is in line with your values, your vision, your purpose, your passion, like to keep taking one step at a time. You may not know everywhere you're going. Like, even when I started my podcast, people are like, well, so what's your vision for this? And I was like, my hope is that each episode can help at least one person. Like, that's my vision. And then, like,
same.
hopefully it becomes more than one, but like, that was my goal at first. One person helped by each episode. And now that we're getting to like, thousands of downloads per week, I'm like, look at all that potential help. That feels great.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Well, that's even just like a huge nugget of wisdom is how do you know you're meant to do something when you literally go through and that's what you're like, no, if it's one person,
Hmm.
it's all worth it because
Yeah.
that's where so many people, and I can only imagine, especially when you started a podcast, you probably heard too, like, don't you know there's already millions of those out there? Like,
Hmm.
why do you think you need really you're a single mom of 4 kids? You think that's adding to your plate? It's not making you need direct money? Like that doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, I know,
Yeah.
but if there's one person, if there's one mom out there that gets
Hmm.
unstuck from the life they're living and branches into the life they were meant to live, I mean, it's all worth it. And so for someone
Yes.
else who has that, it's like that's all it takes. And then just take action and then just keep showing up and then just keep serving, adding value, and it will come around tenfold, especially when I mean, I imagine like you, I mean, the money part is great, but the biggest value that we get is change. And when we can impact
Yes.
someone's life, then that's 100% the currency that like
Hmm.
keeps us up at night, right? Is the amount of
Yeah.
income. So thinking about I can only imagine the stories that you have of moms that you've gotten to live life with and coach through life and all of that. Probably the common question, but it's interesting to know, like, what is the main purpose in a mom? Where are moms when they're like, I need Amy Grace? And what are they? Where are they? What are they coming to you for? What's that journey like?
So I would say the moms that I work with, both in my therapy practice and in coaching and courses and things like that, they tend to be pretty self-aware. They tend to be checking in with themselves enough to know I'm not loving it. Like, I love my kids. They tend to absolutely love their kids. But when they look at their lives, when they look at it, they feel like they're in survival mode, like 24/7. They feel like they're exhausted all the time. They feel like they're not the mom that they wanted to be, that maybe, that they feel like, they're just kind of in a funk is a good way to put it. Like, it's not like they're not necessarily, especially in my coaching practice, I'm not dealing with clinical issues like depression and anxiety. Like, that's therapy work to be done. Like, if you were wanting to deal with clinical mental health stuff, please see a therapist, not a coach. It's
Yes.
Yes. But in the coaching world, like there's a lot of work to be done on like creating a vision for what do you want and how do we move you toward that? And so it's usually women who are like, they may even be like, I don't even know what I want, but it's not exactly this. How
Right.
can we help me find more enjoyment in life? How can I feel like I'm kicking butt as a mom and not just in survival mode? Because we are not meant to live in survival mode.
So good. That's so, so good. So are these mainly working moms? Are these stay-at-home moms that are feeling overwhelmed? Is it all of the above? Is there
I think
any?
all of the above. Like, I've definitely worked with all of the above for sure because, gosh, I've been both. I've been a stay-at-home mom, and I can tell you it is just as overwhelming, if not more, because you put all this pressure on yourself to be like, if I'm gonna stay home, I have to be the super, super stay-at-home mom. Like, I've gotta be the Pinterest mom, and I've gotta have 57 play dates a moment, and I have to have every moment of my kid's life intentional. And it can be really overwhelming. And then on the other side, you've got your working moms who are sitting there split between two things. And they often feel like not only are they not doing a good enough job at the mom piece because they have to divide their time, but they also feel like they're struggling in the work piece because they have to divide their time. And so they often feel that not good enoughness in either way. And so I would say, this is something that whether you're a stay at home mom, a working mom, a work from home mom, an entrepreneur mom, these can all be things that you could struggle with at some point. And in fact, I think if most people are honest, that most people do struggle with it at some point, and we've just normalized the misery of motherhood to some extent. Well, of course, motherhood's just hard. Like, I guess I should just endure it. And yes, motherhood is really freaking hard
Yeah.
if you're doing it right. And it doesn't have to be miserable. It can be both enjoyable and delightful and hard. And it can, go between the two. It can be both at the same time. But we don't have to surrender to motherhood is just hard. Therefore, I'm just going to be miserable for the next 18 plus years of my life. Hold on, kids, is going to be fun.
Right? Exactly. And then you get to do it when you get older, right? It's like this almost like
Yeah.
this martyrdom of motherhood where the
Hmm.
better mom we are is the more miserable that we are. The
Hmm.
dreams that we've given up, the friends that we've given
Hmm.
up, everything that we've given up for our kids becomes like these badges of honor. And we're like, and then you really step back. And I'm thinking, so I have out of my four kids, I have two girls and two boys. So out of my two daughters, what kind of example? And that was my wake up. I read an Ed Milet
Hmm.
quote, and he said the biggest form of parent neglect is a parent that doesn't go after their dreams. So that their
Hmm.
kids watch it. Like if I tell my kids, and anything God's put in your heart, you can do anything. But they're watching me be miserable and sit at home and scroll social media and hate
Hmm.
life. Like I've literally shown them, oh yeah, that's just hogwash because it sounds good, but it's not even achievable. Instead of
Hmm.
showing, I mean, my kids, they see the good and the bad and all the things. I mean, they are watching me completely rebuild life, like from the bottom,
Yeah.
but in a way that I'm like, you know what, it's going to be hard. And there's a lot of sacrifices in the season of rebuilding. But when we get like wherever there is, right, as we're journeying there, we're growing because we're headed in a direction and building that together. And I think that's something like, and I would love your input too, is I think that we've separated like working and and motherhood to think that they're like an antithesis, like it's like an enemy,
Hmm.
oil and water. And instead of we're growing working adults, like we want our
Hmm.
kids to have careers and have passions that they pursue. And also if they have the gift of being a parent one day, that
Hmm.
it's not about the either or, but it's how
Yeah.
do we do both so that we are teaching our kids how to be adults. So
Hmm.
what are your thoughts on?
Well, I 100% agree. Like, the biggest way we teach our kids is by modeling. So, if we are modeling misery as moms, there's a reason why, if you talk to a lot of young adults and teenagers, a lot of them, a much higher portion of them right now are saying they don't want to be parents when they grow up. I don't want to have kids. And this is a new shift. And I think part of it is because everybody's running so ragged and we're portraying this exhaustion and misery 24/7. If
Right.
I was a kid, I wouldn't be looking at that going, sign me up. I'd be like, nope, you know, I think I'll get myself a job and go home and, watch some Netflix with my feet up or something. Like, not have to run around to 50 billion things a day or whatever
Yeah.
it is. And so I think modeling, when we are sitting here in our own misery, even if we can survive it, do we really want our kids to A, think that we're miserable being their moms, which sounds terrible, or B, think that that's the only choice there is? And if you think you're faking it and you know you're miserable on the inside and you think you're faking it and your kids aren't picking up on it, you're wrong. They're totally picking up on it. Like, they're little detectors for this stuff. In fact, there's a whole part of their brain called mirror neurons. And those mirror neurons are the part of their brain that causes them to reflect what is coming toward them in the world. So, for instance, in adults, we still have them. For instance, if I were to yawn, you'd yawn. If
Right.
I were to cross my legs and we're sitting in front of each other, you might do it automatically too. It's that part of our body that responds. So little kids actually have a higher portion of these mirror neurons of their brain. The babies have the highest. So, like, the babies, when you're holding this little tiny newborn, say you're a mama struggling with something like postpartum depression and you're not dealing with it, that baby's feeling it. She's not just noticing it, she's feeling it. And then as you get older, like, those kids may not even know that, like, they're grumpy because you're grumpy, especially if you're sitting there with a fake smile, but internally you're like miserable. They're feeling it and it keeps going. Like, it eventually equals out, but some kids are bigger feelers or highly sensitive and they might pick up on some of those feelings even as they're teenagers and beyond. So, I would say, like, it is so important that we deal with our own stuff because faking it isn't going to cover it. We've got to be truly pursuing being authentic in ourselves and living authentically with joy. And if you can't authentically say there's joy in your life right now, it's time to make some shifts.
That's so good. That's so good. So, because that's where, when I look at kind of the shift in maybe generations and how motherhood looked different, and I think there's different roles of parenting and,
Hmm.
male and female roles, they've got, there's kind of a more muddy, shift in different things. And so I know that motherhood looks different, but getting rid of the stigma of this guilt and shame around motherhood, where if you're doing it different, it means it's wrong. No, wait, like,
Hmm.
it's just different, right? Like,
Yes.
and not judging. And I think, I mean, I know this goes across like culturally, but specifically being a mom. I mean, I've been in enough play groups where you've got the extra crunchy moms who are all
Hmm.
about, like, they just want to talk about, cloth diapering like the whole time.
Hmm.
You've got these other moms who are like, I'm popping, a Coke in the bottle to keep my kids. You're like, so there's this huge stark difference in parenting, growing up. But I think it's so much deeper than choices and how, what you choose to feed your kids or don't feed your kids or dress your kids or how you don't dress your kids. It's just like what you said. It's this emotional intelligence, this healthiness of being real. I mean, I have had some dumpster fires in my life and my kids have experienced some of that. And
Hmm.
so I think as moms, we get to choose whether we're going to use that vulnerability to build bridges with our kids, or we're going to use it to isolate ourselves from our kids and not let them experience a healthy way of dealing with really hard seasons of life. And it's
Yeah.
age appropriate, of course,
Right.
but I think that's, I mean, and I'm sure you could, to speak to that of how much this guilt, shame, comparison, which is, of course, the
Hmm.
joy, what that steals out of motherhood, where we don't even give ourselves permission to dream about what
Yes.
motherhood could be.
Yeah. Well, and I actually just recently dropped a couple of episodes, one about mom guilt and one about mom shaming. but that are just like, I call them my super mom shorts. So instead of being interviews, they're about like, 10-ish minutes long, that little nuggets, because these are such pervasive issues that are so common for moms. Like, we beat ourselves up if we don't perceive we're good enough. And sometimes that's coming from outside pressures, and sometimes that's coming from inside stuff. But like, I think it's super important that if we're trying to nurture authentic kids, kids that are emotionally intelligent, that we sometimes share some of those things. So like, silly example, but yesterday I had been going from like 6 a.m. till we got home at 4, and I was exhausted. And I told my kids, you know what? I had planned on cooking you guys a nice dinner. Can we do frozen pizza? Like,
Real life. Yes.
I am spent. And like, I just owned that. I'm like, here's some food,
Mhm.
but mama's got to get some rest, because if I don't, I'm going to be exhausted. And so, I checked in with my kids about their stuff, and I wasn't like, peace, I'm out, but like, kind of I was to a certain extent. Like, please come to me for the needs. Or if you want to sit and snuggle and watch TV, I'm down, but mama needs some downtime.
That's so huge
So,
because you
yeah,
have to take care, right? We can't fill anybody else's cup when ours is empty. So being able as a
exactly.
mom to give ourselves that space and grace to, we're
Hmm.
humans, right?
Yes.
We are not like the Energizer Bunny. We have time,
Hmm.
we need to be refueled and refilled. Yeah, I love that because because here's the deal: your kids are going to have those days when they grow up, right? When they have
Hmm.
kids of their own, where they're like, "Oh my goodness, I'm spent." You know what?
Hmm.
Tonight's a frozen pizza kind of night, and
Totally.
so
Yeah. I'm a big fan of having frozen foods in the freezer for those moments. Or if want to go through a drive-through, like, we don't need to be perfectionists that we have to have these great meals. And it was funny because I was like, I actually had a plan. And usually for me, the biggest, hardest part of dinner is the plan. Once
oh,
I know what I'm cooking, I'm good. But I even had a plan, and I was like, still can't do it. I can't do this.
she's done.
Pizza.
I love it. That's so cool. Okay, well, just kind of, wrapping up, talking about authenticity and again, freedom to just be you. And I think even just hearing you talk, a lot of times when people think authenticity, they're like, oh, yeah, I'm just going to be myself. And so if I'm a jerk, then I'm just a jerk. And I think there's important,
Mm,
especially with motherhood, is the healing part of it, right? Is
yes.
understanding that if we're hurt people. And
Yep.
no mom is going to be perfect at whatsoever at all, but it's a gift to the people around us and ultimately to ourselves to
Hmm.
heal and to take ownership and to be real and to especially model. I love that, just modeling being authentic. And so then
Hmm.
you're removing any stigma from our kids thinking they have to have it all together all the time. And there's
Mm-mm.
so much pressure. I cannot even imagine, which we didn't really touch much on, which I'm sure you've talked a lot about social media and the impact that that's had on motherhood and
Hmm.
our kids and parenting through social media and all of the additives that causes. But yeah, just being real and just being like, I used to work with high school girls, and I did that because I wanted to be for high school girls what I needed in high school. Go
Hmm.
through and say none of us, even if you had an amazing childhood, right? And it's not the knocking childhoods, but if you had things that you've blamed and you've wished were different, then you get to recreate that, and you have a beautiful gift called your own life where you get to
Yeah.
create things and break generational chains that have held back and all of that. But
Hmm.
with the tagline, your authenticity is your superpower. Speaking to moms and for others, even just wanting to take that leap, and maybe there's a mom listening who is like, I finally want to have the freedom to pursue what I know is passionate inside of me and not feel the guilt and you not feel like I'm choosing something over my kids. But how do you think authenticity is your superpower? But what does that mean to you in your line of work?
Gosh, I just feel like when you can really get real and know your strengths, know your weaknesses, face them, work on, living into who you were meant to be, not trying to do 50 other things that other people are doing, but who are you and who are you meant to be? That's when you thrive. That's when your family thrives. So, for me, I was not meant to be the person who has a Pinterest perfect home at all times. It's just not, that's not my gifting, and it's okay.
Yes.
Like, so owning that instead of sitting there going, but I'm failing because my home doesn't, like, I moved in here 4 years ago, and there are vast numbers of walls with nothing on them still. Like, and that's okay, right? So being able to own, this is my strength. This is not my strength. This is my vision. This is what I hope for my kids. And it doesn't have to be the same as your friends, your neighbors, some, social media influencer, like trying to get really clear about that. And so that's so much of the work I do with moms is helping them to get clear on what is the motherhood they're made for. Like I have a whole program called Create Your Own Motherhood for that purpose. And it's literally built around how do we create a motherhood that's tailored to who you are, who your kids are, that you can thrive in and love.
So much. So I know every mom listening, if they're not already following you, they're going to want to. Where's the best place to find you and find out how to get plugged into what you're doing and your work? And of course, I'll put it all in the show notes, but where's the best place to connect with you?
Yeah. Well, if you're listening to this, you probably love podcasts. So I would love for you to hop over to Everyday Supermoms and listen to some of these amazing stories. Each week I interview a different mom. So we talk about all sorts of authentic, real struggles, such as infertility struggles, pregnancy. We talk about birth and postpartum. We talk about parenting teens and empty nesting. We talk about single parenting and parenting with a partner. We talk about all of the stuff in the context of real life stories. So we're not just like topically going over stuff, but we're talking about it in terms of what have other people lived through. So you never feel alone in like, only I deal with this. No, I promise it's many other people. And you can follow me on Instagram at Hey Amy Grace for all the things. And you can easily find all my links through that. So I would love for you to follow me at Hey Amy Grace.
Yay, definitely. What a great combo. Thank you for your work and what you're doing
Yeah.
and just being real and helping people along the way. And I've loved this combo. It's great to connect. And, I love that's the beauty of social media, right? Is to connect with people that you
Yes.
never could have connected with. It can be used for bad, but I think it can be used for way more good. And it's an honor
Absolutely.
to know you. So thank you for
Oh,
combo and thank you guys for listening. And we'll see you guys next week and keep being genuine. And I believe in you and I love you. And that may sound crazy because I don't know you yet, but man, people hate people for absolutely no reason. I will choose to love you for no reason until I meet you and find the millions of reasons there are to love you. You guys have a great week. See you next week.